The projection screen flickered, then froze, a harsh blue light illuminating Alara Vance's panicked face. The hush that fell over the crowded auditorium wasn't one of awe, but of awkward pity. I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking as the weight of 100 judgmental stares pressed down on her. Backstage, the dim corridor offered little comfort. Alara slumped against the cool wall, the adrenaline crash leaving her hollow. Lena Chen, her best friend and co-founder, put a steadying hand on her shoulder. "It wasn't your fault, Alara. Tech glitches happen." Alara shook her head, tears pricking her eyes. "This can't happen, Lena. Not now. I sank everything into this, my savings, my student loan deferral. If Nexus doesn't get this funding, I don't just lose a startup. I lose my apartment. I lose everything." A few days later, a new notice board appeared in the accelerator's common area, buzzing with murmurs. "The Partner Challenge?" Lena read aloud, a curious frown on her face. "Teams are being paired with a senior mentor for the next phase," Alara scoffed. "Great. Another expert to tell me what I'm doing wrong." Lena scrolled down the list. "Wait, your partner is J. Thorne? That's it. No company, no bio?" Alara leaned closer. "Just J. Thorne? That's not suspicious at all." Alara arrived at the Minimalist Cafe, expecting an ego-driven tech bro. Instead, a man in his early 30s, dressed in an expensive but understated dark suit, sat quietly at a corner table. Julian Thorne. Everything about him screamed old money, yet he had an almost reclusive air. "Alara Vance?" he asked, his voice calm, observant blue eyes meeting hers. "I believe your demo froze because of a recursive loop in the data parsing module, specifically where it handles asynchronous user input. A simple syntax error, easily missed, but catastrophic for real-time processing." Alara stared, utterly blindsided by his immediate, profound insight. Julian spent hours in Alara's cramped home office, his focused intensity filling the small space. Screens glowed with lines of code as he moved with a quiet efficiency, his fingers dancing across the keyboard. He wasn't just debugging, he was dissecting, optimizing, and suggesting improvements Alara hadn't even considered. "You could refactor this entire function," he murmured, sketching a complex algorithm on a napkin. "It would reduce latency by 30%. Alara, despite her fiercely independent pride, found herself nodding, grudging admiration stirring within her. He was undeniably, terrifyingly brilliant. The harsh overhead lights of the accelerator workspace had been dimmed hours ago, replaced by the soft glow of multiple screens and the hum of servers. Alara, usually rigid with focus, found herself leaning back, a rare, genuine smile playing on her lips. Julian Thorne, beside her, had just sketched a complex algorithm on the whiteboard, a solution so elegant it made her own code sing. They had been lost for hours, bouncing ideas, debugging, refining. He'd even laughed once, a quiet, almost shy sound, when she'd accidentally spilled cold coffee on a crucial diagram. "You know," Alara said, wiping away the remnants of the coffee with a napkin, "I used to spend nights like this alone, just me and a mountain of takeout. This is better." Julian nodded, his blue eyes glinting in the screen light. "Collaboration can reveal unexpected angles. It's why I got into tech, really. That feeling of building something together." He paused, a flicker of something distant in his gaze. "Or, trying to, anyway. Alone, it's just a puzzle. Together, it's a shared world." Alara found herself, surprisingly, comfortable with the silence that followed, a productive quiet filled with the click of keys and the whisper of shared ideas. She realized, with a jolt, that she hadn't felt this intellectually stimulated, or this genuinely seen, in years. A few days later, a rare patch of sunlight beckoned them outside. They sat on a park bench, the city's distant rumble a dull counterpoint to the chirping birds. Alara, still feeling the lingering warmth of their productive late-night session, found herself opening up. "My parents, they weren't exactly supportive of my computer obsession," she confessed, tracing patterns on the worn wooden bench. "They wanted me to take over the family flower shop. Practical, safe. But I couldn't. I remember spending all my allowance on old tech magazines, teaching myself to code on a borrowed laptop in the library. Felt like I was building my own escape route. Julian listened, his gaze thoughtful, unblinking. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer platitudes. When she finished, a quiet moment passed before he spoke. It's a powerful motivator. That kind of hunger, he said, his voice low. Knowing what it's like to build from nothing, to have no safety net but your own ingenuity. Ilara felt a strange sense of connection, a hint that he understood more than she realized. His words, though cryptic, resonated deeply. He spoke with the quiet authority of someone who knew the weight of such ambition, but also the loneliness that came with it. It made her wonder fleetingly what his nothing had looked like. As they walked back towards the accelerator building, a figure emerged from a rival team's office down the hallway. Tall, impeccably dressed, with a self-satisfied smirk that seemed permanently etched on his face. Cassian Thorne. Well, well, Julian, Cassian drawled, his eyes sweeping over Ilara with a dismissive glance. Slumming it in the trenches, are we? Still chasing those disruptive ideas that never quite disrupt? His gaze lingered on Ilara, a cold, appraising look. And who is this ambitious young protege? Hope she's not too attached to her intellectual property, brother. The tech world is a shark tank. Ilara bristled, her hand instinctively clenching. Julian's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly, his jaw tightening. Cassian, Julian replied, his voice flat, devoid of the warmth Ilara had come to appreciate. Ilara's work is groundbreaking and secure. Cassian merely chuckled, a dry, grating sound. Of course, always the idealist, aren't you? Keep that moral compass steady, Julian. Wouldn't want it to point you in the wrong direction. He gave them another condescending smirk before disappearing around the corner. Ilara felt a chill, not just from Cassian's thinly veiled threats, but from the sudden, icy tension that had sprung up between the brothers. Julian had downplayed it, but the animosity was palpable. She glanced at Julian, a new question forming in her mind. Just who was his family? He just left. Ilara fumed, pacing their shared workspace later that afternoon. The critical deadline for their next submission loomed, and Julian had simply packed his bag and vanished, offering only a vague, something came up. Lena, busy organizing her own project files nearby, looked up sympathetically. Maybe it was an emergency, Lena offered, though her tone lacked conviction. An emergency where you can't send a single text? Or give a 5-second explanation? Ilara threw her hands up. He's brilliant, Lena, I'll give him that. He sees things in my code I didn't even know were there, but he's also a complete mystery man. He barely talks about himself, and then he just disappears. What kind of partnership is this? Lena shrugged, closing her laptop. He's a Thorne, Ilara. They're known for being eccentric, Julian especially, reclusive even. Maybe that's just how he operates. He's obviously invested in your success, otherwise he wouldn't be here. Ilara stopped pacing, staring at the empty chair where Julian had been. Invested, yes, but an asterisk her success, or something else entirely. His evasiveness, his brother's strange comments, the snippets of wealth she'd glimpsed. It all coalesced into a nagging unease. The more she worked with him, the more she realized how little she actually knew about Julian Thorne. Later that evening, nursing a lukewarm coffee in the accelerator lounge, Ilara pretended to read a discarded tech magazine. Her ears, however, were tuned to a conversation nearby. 2 other participants were discussing the partner challenge with hushed awe. Can you believe J. Thorne is actually here? One whispered. The Julian Thorne? I heard he practically never leaves his compound. Yeah, my mentor was saying he's a total recluse, the other replied. But then, with that kind of family money, who needs to be social? The Thornes basically own half the tech sector. Titan Tech's just one piece of their empire. Ilara's blood ran cold. Thorne family. Vast wealth. Recluse. The words echoed the unease she'd felt earlier. Julian, with his understated suits and quiet demeanor, suddenly felt less like a fellow struggling innovator, and more like an observer, an outsider. She remembered the expensive, minimalist watch peeking from his cuff when he'd debugged her code, the casual way he'd dismissed Cassian's taunts. It was all a stark contrast to her own ramen-fueled nights and mounting debt. A twinge of discomfort, a seed of doubt, began to sprout in the fertile ground of her anxiety. How could someone from such a different world truly understand, let alone partner, with someone like her? The harsh glare of the accelerator's main screen felt like a spotlight specifically designed to highlight Elara's every flaw. Midpoint review. Game-changing innovation. The lead judge intoned, his words echoing the immense pressure Elara already carried. She clutched her notes, her knuckles white. This wasn't just about winning, it was about survival. Every line of code, every late night, was a gamble with her future, with the last shreds of her savings. Beside her, Julian Thorne remained a picture of composure, his gaze fixed on the screen, a quiet, reassuring presence. "We've got this," he murmured, a low hum that barely registered above the anxious thrum of her own pulse, yet offered a strange, fleeting comfort. Elara nodded, a tremor running through her. They had to. The cafeteria, usually a noisy hub, seemed to hold its breath as Cassian Thorne sauntered towards their table, a predatory smile playing on his lips. Well, if it isn't the dynamic duo," he drawled, his eyes lingering on Elara with an almost dismissive condescension before flicking to Julian. "Still slumming it with the hopefuls, little brother? And your little project here." He gestured vaguely at Elara's laptop. "Still chasing pipe dreams?" Elara bristled, her jaw tightening. "Our project is about to change how people interact with technology, Cassian. Something Titan Tech could only dream of." Cassian chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Big words from someone who nearly crashed and burned on stage last week. And you, Julian? Are you just here for the novelty? Or did Daddy send you to scout for cheap talent?" Julian's hand, resting on the table, clenched imperceptibly. "Elara's talent is anything but cheap, Cassian, and my commitment is unwavering." His voice was calm, controlled, but the understated defense left Elara with a flicker of unease. Was that all he had to say? Was he truly committed to asterisk her? Later that evening, in the accelerator's designated quiet zone, a hushed urgency permeated the air. Elara and Julian were deep in a debugging session when his phone buzzed. Julian glanced at the caller ID, his expression unreadable, then rose abruptly. "Excuse me," he said, stepping away, his back to her. His voice dropped. A low murmur of corporate jargon Elara couldn't quite decipher. "The Q3 projections. Liquidity. Acquisition strategy." He spoke in fragments, his tone firm, yet guarded. Elara watched his stiff posture, the way he kept his voice almost a whisper. It wasn't a personal call. It sounded important and secretive. When he returned, his face was a mask, his eyes distant. "Everything all right?" she asked, trying to keep her tone casual. "Work emergency," he replied, tight-lipped, offering no further explanation. The evasiveness, combined with the strange, high-stakes language, pricked at Elara's nerves. He was a puzzle she couldn't solve, and the pieces felt increasingly out of place. Who exactly was Julian Thorne, and what was he hiding? The glowing screen of her laptop was the only light in Elara's cramped apartment. Julian's mysterious call had gnawed at her, feeding the unease Cassian's taunts had sparked. She typed J. Thorne into the search bar, then Titan Tech, trying to connect the dots. Scattered articles appeared, mentioning a, quote, tech dynasty and the Thorne Empire. She scrolled, her eyes scanning for any definitive link. There was mention of a reclusive heir, a shadowy figure rarely photographed, connected to vast wealth, but no clear image, no direct confirmation that Julian Thorne was that Thorne. The information was vague, frustratingly incomplete. It felt like trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing, each new crumb of information only deepening the sense of foreboding. She was out of her depth, sifting through a world of privilege and power she barely understood, but she wouldn't stop. The first hint of dawn was barely breaking when Elara, already dressed for another grueling day, cycled into the accelerator parking lot. Her old, beat-up bike clattered quietly on the asphalt. She froze. A sleek black luxury sedan, polished to a mirror shine, idled near the entrance. As she watched, Julian Thorne emerged from the back seat, looking impeccably tailored even at this ungodly hour. A uniformed chauffeur swiftly closed the door behind him. Julian turned, his gaze meeting hers, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "Elara," he said, a brief, almost imperceptible awkwardness in his tone. He quickly dismissed the driver with a discreet nod. She felt a familiar burn of insecurity. Her entire net worth was probably less than the car he'd just stepped out of. Their worlds were not just different. They were universes apart, and the chasm felt wider than ever. The harsh blue light of Elara's monitor slashed through the pre-dawn gloom of her accelerator workspace, illuminating a nightmare. Access denied. File modified. The words screamed at her. Her proprietary code, the very heart of her startup, had been breached. A flashing security log confirmed it. Late last night, an unauthorized copy. Panic seized her, a cold, tightening grip around her throat. "No, no, no, no!" she whispered, her hands shaking so violently she could barely type. This wasn't just a hack. This was a deliberate, targeted violation. Corporate espionage. Her dream, her future, everything she'd poured her soul into, felt irrevocably tainted. The accelerator's security office hummed with a stale scent of coffee and desperation. Elara leaned over the grizzled security officer, pointing a trembling finger at the monitor. "You're telling me these logs show only 2 people had access to my project area during the breach window?" The officer, a man named Miller, nodded, his expression neutral. "That's correct, Ms. Vance. Your ID and a special access code granted to Mr. J. Thorne." Elara's blood ran cold. Julian. Jur's special access privileges from the accelerator's board. The words echoed like a death knell. Of course. How convenient. He'd been so helpful, so insightful. Too helpful. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. This wasn't a random hack. This was personal. This was betrayal. "Elara, look!" Lena's voice was sharp, cutting through the dull ache in Elara's chest. They were in the common area, and Lena was pointing at a news ticker scrolling across a large screen. Titan Tech to announce revolutionary new feature at upcoming industry summit. Elara stared, her eyes wide with a dawning, sickening realization. Titan Tech. Cassian Thorne. Julian's brother. "No," Elara breathed, a frantic whisper. "No, it can't be." Lena's face was etched with concern. "Their announcement is slated for next week, same as our final pitch, and they're calling it revolutionary, just like you described your new feature to Julian." The coincidence was too stark, too horrifying to ignore. It solidified the terrifying fear. Julian was involved. Elara saw Julian in the lobby, calm and composed, talking to a fellow participant. She moved like a predator, all her fear coalescing into a searing rage. "Julian!" Her voice cracked, drawing stares. He turned, his blue eyes widening slightly in surprise. "Elara, what's wrong? Don't play innocent with me," she hissed, her finger jabbing the air between them. "My code was stolen last night. And you, with your special access, are the only one besides me who could have done it." Julian's expression hardened. A mask of controlled composure. "Elara, I assure you I had nothing to do with this." His calm, non-committal answer only infuriated her further. He wasn't denying his access, just feigning ignorance. It was a calculated performance. Later, hiding behind a display pillar, Elara overheard 2 accelerator judges. "Julian Thorne's generous funding keeps this place afloat, you know," one said. "And the Thorne family has a vested interest in any new tech coming out of here," the other nodded. "Especially if it gives Titan Tech an edge." Elara's face crumpled. It was true. All of it. Julian Thorne wasn't her partner. He was a plant, sent by his family. He'd wormed his way in, pretended to help, all to steal her ideas for his brother's corporate empire. Every kind word, every insightful suggestion, every moment of shared passion, it had all been a lie. She felt utterly foolish, used, and profoundly betrayed. Ilara's fingers trembled over the keyboard in the accelerator library, the fluorescent lights humming a dull counterpoint to the frantic beating of her heart. She'd typed J. Thorne Titan Tech and added, "Code for good," on a whim, remembering the judge's whispers, the foundation Julian's family ostensibly supported. What flashed on the screen next made her breath hitch, a cold, hard knot forming in her stomach. A giant headline screamed, Julian Thorne, the reclusive billionaire behind Thorne Innovations and the Code for Good Foundation. Below it, a high-resolution photo of Julian, looking exactly as she knew him, but with an air of unapproachable power. The accompanying article detailed his vast wealth, his philanthropic endeavors, his family's tech dynasty. Every word was a hammer blow. Reclusive billionaire? The pieces clicked into place with sickening precision. His expensive car, his quiet confidence, the PO special access privileges at security, his cryptic phone calls, Cassian's thinly veiled threats, and that damn housing program he'd been so focused on. How convenient that you happen to be sitting right next to someone who fits your program's demographic perfectly. The words, her own internal accusations, echoed from a different story, yet felt perfectly tailored for this moment. He hadn't just been a plant for Cassian. He had been evaluating her, a struggling entrepreneur, a charity case for his Code for Good Foundation. Her face burned with humiliation. She had poured her heart into her work, shared her vulnerabilities, only to be seen as a project. A data point. Not a partner. Ilara found Julian in the main lobby, a bustling hub of activity where participants mingled, oblivious to the storm brewing within her. He stood by the coffee machine, his back to her, seemingly engrossed in a quiet conversation with another mentor. Rage, hot and blinding, surged through her, overriding the humiliation, overriding everything. She strode towards him, her vision narrowed, the buzz of voices around her fading into a distant hum. "Julian!" Her voice, sharp and laced with a fury she hadn't known she possessed, cut through the din. He turned, his calm blue eyes meeting hers, and for a fleeting second, she saw a flicker of surprise, then concern. But it was too late for concern. "You played me," she accused, her voice rising despite herself, drawing curious glances from nearby participants, her hands clenched at her sides. "You, the reclusive billionaire behind the Code for Good Foundation, decided I was a worthy charity project, didn't you? Or was I just a convenient source of IP for your family's empire?" Julian's composure faltered, his expression shifting from concern to genuine hurt. "Ilara, what are you talking about?" he said, his voice quiet, almost pleading. "Don't pretend you don't know," she spat, gesturing wildly with one hand. "The Code for Good? The special access? The convenient timing of your mentorship? You saw a struggling founder, a perfect success story for your philanthropic PR, or maybe a ripe target for corporate espionage, and you swooped in. How convenient that you were so interested in my struggles, my ambition. You wanted to know my weaknesses, didn't you, so you could exploit them." A dropped coffee cup clattered to the polished floor, its contents splattering, mirroring the mess inside her. "It's not like that, Ilara," Julian said quickly, stepping closer, his hand reaching out instinctively, but she recoiled as if burned. The raw pain in his eyes was almost convincing, but her humiliation was a thick wall, impenetrable. "No? Then explain it," she challenged, her voice cracking, tears pricking her eyes despite her desperate attempt to remain defiant. "Explain why the great Julian Thorne, billionaire heir, slummed it in the accelerator with us peasants. Why you pretended to be just, J. Thorne, if not to manipulate me. To get close, to gain my trust, so I'd spill everything about my company, about my code? I wanted to meet you as just me," he insisted, his voice earnest. "I respected your work, your vision. My role here was to scout talent, yes, but my interest in you, in your project, was genuine. The theft, Ilara, I had nothing to do with it. I suspect Cassian, and I was trying to. Don't you dare bring your brother into this as some convenient scapegoat," she interrupted, shaking her head vehemently. "This entire thing, your kindness, your insights, our late-night brainstorming, it was all a calculated performance, wasn't it? A brilliant one. I'll give you that. You wanted to know the worst part. For a few weeks, I actually felt like I was worth something. Like maybe I wasn't just some pathetic founder who couldn't get her life together. But this whole time, you were just evaluating me like some kind of case study. She turned abruptly, unable to bear the sight of his pained face any longer. I have to go. Julian stood alone on the accelerator rooftop, the chill wind mirroring the emptiness in his chest. Ilara's accusations echoed in the silence, each word a fresh wound. Asterisk, you played me. Asterisk, a charity project. Asterisk, a calculated performance. He leaned against the railing, staring blankly at the sprawling city lights, each one a tiny world oblivious to his internal turmoil. He had wanted to tell her, had planned to. But how? How did you explain to someone who saw every act of kindness from a wealthy person as a transaction that your interest was genuine? His reclusiveness, a defense mechanism against those who only saw his money, had now become his greatest betrayer. He replayed their conversations, the easy laughter, the shared passion for code, the brief moments of vulnerability. Had it all been a lie to her? He had tried to protect her from the political machinations of his family, from the expectations that came with his name. Instead, he had only alienated her further. Back in her apartment, the familiar clutter felt oppressive, a physical manifestation of her shattered dreams. Empty ramen cups and discarded energy drink cans littered her desk, a stark contrast to the elegant cafe where she'd first met Julian. She sat hunched over her laptop, the screen a black mirror reflecting her defeated face. Her code, once a source of fierce pride, now felt tainted. The stolen lines were a gaping wound. But the deeper hurt was the betrayal. She had been so careful, so fiercely independent, so wary of accepting help, and yet she had let him in. Julian Thorne, the reclusive billionaire, had seen her, truly seen her, or so she had thought. Was she truly so naive? To believe in genuine kindness, to trust a man who moved in worlds so far removed from her own? The crushing weight of isolation settled over her, heavy and cold. She was alone again, her dreams stolen, her trust in tatters, and her own judgment a bitter failure. The relentless buzz of her phone had finally died, replaced by the grating static of the small battered TV in Ilara's apartment. She hadn't turned it on, but it had flickered to life, a digital ghost mocking her solitude. News channels, one after another, flashed lurid headlines across the screen. Accelerator scandal. Whistleblower alleges corporate espionage. Then, more pointedly, Thorne family feud implicates billionaire mentor. Her name wasn't explicitly mentioned, but the grainy photos of the accelerator lobby, the blurred outline of her furious face were enough. Ilara felt a suffocating wave of nausea. Her private pain, her desperate gamble, had become a public spectacle, dissected by pundits who knew nothing of the crushing weight of her ambition or the betrayal that had fueled her outburst. She shrank further into the worn cushions of her couch, pulling a threadbare blanket tighter, as if it could somehow shield her from the glare of the world, from the judgmental eyes she imagined boring into her from every screen. The phone on the coffee table remained stubbornly silent now, a stark contrast to its earlier frantic ringing, and she was grateful for the quiet, even as it deepened her isolation. A persistent knocking started at her door, firm but not aggressive. Ilara flinched, her heart hammering. She knew it was Lena. Her best friend had been calling every hour, sending frantic texts, leaving concerned voicemails. Ilara had ignored them all. She couldn't face anyone, especially not Lena, who had seen her at her most vulnerable, then at her most explosively foolish. The knocking paused, then started again, softer this time, accompanied by Lena's muffled voice. Ilara? I know you're in there. Please, just let me know you're okay. I'm worried. Ilara pressed her ear to the cool wood, then peered through the peephole. Lena stood there, a worried frown etched on her face, a plastic bag of groceries clutched in one hand. Ilara's throat tightened. Go away, Lena, she whispered, her voice cracking. I need to be alone. She heard a sigh, then the soft rustle of paper as Lena slipped something under the door. I'm leaving you some food. Lena's voice came through, thick with concern. And a note. Please read it. Please, Ilara. Hours later, the apartment was still silent, save for the low hum of the refrigerator. Ilara was staring blankly at a wall when her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. She hesitated then, driven by a morbid curiosity, answered. A smooth, confident voice purred, "Ilara Vance, I presume? This is Cassian Thorne." Ilara stiffened. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice cold. "Just checking in," Cassian replied, a predatory warmth in his tone. "Heard about the, unpleasantness at the accelerator. My brother can be quite intense and secretive. It's a shame he dragged your brilliant work into his family drama." Ilara's grip tightened on the phone. "What are you getting at? Only that talent like yours shouldn't be wasted, Ilara. And certainly not betrayed. Titan Tech is always looking for innovators. We value originality, and we compensate handsomely for it. Think about it. A fresh start. Away from this." He was preying on her. She knew it. Julian's true nature. Was Cassian really so different? The offer was tempting. A lifeline. But something about his slick sympathy tasted false. "I'm not interested," Ilara said, her voice firm, surprising even herself. "And my work isn't for sale to anyone who exploits it." She hung up, a tremor running through her, but a flicker of pride, too. 2 days later, the knocking returned. This time, Ilara opened the door. Lena stood there, a warm, knowing smile on her face, a container of her mother's homemade pho in her hands. "Thought you might be hungry," Lena said simply, stepping past Ilara into the messy apartment. Ilara didn't protest, her defenses worn thin. As they ate, Lena spoke, not about Julian, but about Ilara's app, about its potential, about why she believed in it. Then, gently, Lena brought it up. "Look, I know you're hurting. And you felt betrayed. But think about it, Ilara. Julian Thorne, a reclusive billionaire, spends weeks with you, debugging your code, brainstorming late at night, sharing ideas. Does that sound like a guy who just wants to exploit you for charity, or steal your IP? He already has everything. He could just buy any tech he wants." Ilara stared at her soup, the steam warming her face. "He lied to me," she mumbled. "He was so secretive." "Maybe he had reasons," Lena pressed, her voice soft. "Reasons that aren't about being evil. Remember how he figured out your glitch that first day? How he listened when you talked about your childhood? That wasn't an act, Ilara. That was genuine." A tiny crack formed in Ilara's wall of anger, a sliver of doubt in her certainty. In his impossibly spacious, minimalist apartment high above the city, Julian Thorne sat at his desk, the glow of his laptop illuminating his strained face. He stared at the blank screen, his fingers hovering over the keyboard, typing and deleting words he couldn't bring himself to send. "Tregson, Ilara, asterisk," he started, then backspaced. "Kung sorry, too simple, too hollow." He ran a hand through his dark hair, the city lights below blurring into streaks of gold and silver. He pictured her face, twisted in anger, the raw hurt in her eyes. It mirrored his own. He hadn't meant for any of this, he had only wanted to help. "I know how it looks. My secrecy, it was a mistake. I never meant to deceive you. I wanted you to see me as Julian, not Thorne Innovations, not the Code for Good Foundation, just me." He deleted that too. It sounded like an excuse. He wanted her to understand, to know the truth that he had been so careful to hide, a shield against all the people who only saw his name, his money, his connections. "I watched you. From the first pitch, even when it crashed, I saw your brilliance, your passion. And then, as we worked, I saw your resilience, your integrity. I felt a connection, Ilara. A genuine one. I fell for you, a little, I think. And that scared me more than anything. Because I knew if I told you who I was, you'd never believe it." His eyes burned. He couldn't send it. Not yet. Not while her anger was still fresh, her hurt so profound. He closed the laptop, plunging the room into near darkness, leaving him alone with the echoing silence and the crushing weight of his unsent words. The harsh fluorescent lights of the accelerator library usually filled Lena with a kind of nervous energy, but today, she was a woman on a mission. Ilara had retreated into a shell of hurt pride, and Lena knew the only way to break through was with irrefutable truth. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, searching through corporate filings, news archives, anything that mentioned Julian Thorne and his notorious Code for Good Foundation. Most articles painted him as the enigmatic tech titan, the reclusive billionaire. But then, a few clicks deeper, buried in an obscure digital magazine from years ago, a headline caught her eye. Thorne Air Funds, Code for Good, in honor of struggling mother. Lena's breath hitched. There it was, a grainy black-and-white photo of a young Julian, looking far less polished, standing in front of a modest community center. Below it, a quote. Asterisk. My mother taught me that true innovation isn't about profit, but about impact. She built her world from nothing, and I owe her everything. Lena felt a jolt. This wasn't the man Ilara thought she knew. This was a mirror. Ilara sat hunched over her cold coffee, the apartment still littered with the remnants of her self-imposed exile. Lena burst in, laptop clutched in her hand, her eyes blazing with a mix of excitement and indignation. You were wrong, Ilara. We were both wrong. She thrust the screen towards Ilara, pointing a determined finger at the article. Ilara's eyes, still swollen from sleepless nights and frustrated tears, widened as she read. The words blurred, then sharpened. Julian Thorne's mother, Maria, a single parent who worked multiple jobs. His childhood in the struggling East Side, the very neighborhood where Code for Good began. A photo of a woman with kind, tired eyes, so unlike the polished images of the Thorne dynasty. Ilara felt a punch to the gut. The anger, the humiliation, the perceived betrayal, they all started to crumble, replaced by a devastating wave of regret. How could she have been so blind? So quick to judge based on her own pain. Her throat tightened, and hot tears, different from the angry ones, welled in her eyes. The lobby of Julian Thorne's apartment building was a cathedral of polished marble and hushed opulence. Ilara felt utterly out of place in her worn jeans and faded hoodie, a stark contrast to the discreetly luxurious surroundings. She paced, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. What would she say? I'm sorry for accusing you of being a corporate spy? I'm sorry for thinking you were just another rich kid playing charity? The words felt inadequate, clumsy. Her fierce independence, once a shield, now felt like a cage she had trapped herself in. The pride that had fueled her ambition had also blinded her. She checked her watch for the 10th time, her palms sweating. This wasn't just about clearing Julian's name. It was about salvaging her own integrity, about acknowledging the raw, vulnerable connection they'd forged, however briefly. It was terrifying, but she knew, with a certainty that cut through her fear, that she had to face him. Julian's apartment was minimalist, yet warm, filled with natural light. He stood by the window, his back to her, when she finally found him. Julian. Ilara's voice was a whisper, thick with remorse. He turned, his blue eyes guarded, but a flicker of something she couldn't quite decipher crossed his face. I am so incredibly sorry, she stammered, her gaze falling to her clasped hands. I let my own insecurities, my own past, twist everything. I jumped to conclusions, and I accused you of terrible things. I had no right. Julian remained silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, a slow, almost imperceptible softening. Ilara, he said, his voice calm, I understand why you felt that way. My secrecy didn't help. He stepped closer, not invading her space, but signaling his willingness to engage. But the truth is, I suspected Cassian was behind the code theft from the moment you told me. He's been trying to undermine me and the Foundation for years, ever since I chose impact over pure profit. This is just his latest attempt. Ilara looked at him, the weight of her misunderstanding lifting, replaced by a surge of renewed determination. Cassian, she repeated, the name now dripping with cold resolve. He played me. He played us both. Julian nodded, a shared purpose now glinting in his eyes. He underestimated you, Ilara, and he underestimated what we could achieve together. He walked over to a large monitor, pulling up a complex network diagram. We need to find the digital fingerprints. His team might have been sloppy, thinking they were untouchable. Alara's mind, dormant for days under a cloud of despair, sprang to life. She moved to the screen, her fingers tracing hypothetical pathways. The intellectual spark, the electric synergy that had drawn them together, reignited. This wasn't just about reclaiming her code. It was about justice, about proving that integrity and innovation could triumph over corporate greed. As their hands brushed over the keyboard, a different kind of current passed between them, a silent promise of partnership, both professional and something far more profound. Julian's apartment felt less like a fortress and more like a quiet sanctuary as he began to speak, his gaze distant, fixed on a framed photograph Alara hadn't noticed before. A smiling woman with tired but kind eyes, holding a younger Julian. "My mother, Clara Thorne," he said, his voice softer than Alara had ever heard it. "She raised me alone in the projects of Westside. Father abandoned us when I was 7. She worked 2, sometimes 3, jobs, just to keep a roof over our heads. I remember nights she'd pretend not to be hungry so I could have the last of the ramen." Alara felt a pang in her chest, a profound resonance with his words. This wasn't the detached billionaire she'd imagined. This was a man who understood the gnawing fear of scarcity, the desperate fight for dignity. He explained how he'd clawed his way into tech, driven by a need to ensure no other child felt that same insecurity. "The Code for Good Foundation," he continued. "It's not charity to me. It's a promise I made to her, and to myself. And my reclusiveness? It's a shield. When you come from nothing, and suddenly have everything, people only see the wealth. They forget the struggle. They forget you." Alara reached out, her hand gently covering his on the table, a silent acknowledgement of a shared past. Julian pulled out a sleek tablet, projecting a series of documents onto the wall. "Cassian," he began, his voice hardening, "has always seen anything I build as a threat, or an opportunity to exploit. My foundation's early days were a constant battle against his attempts to discredit our work, to poach our talent, even to steal donor lists." He scrolled through old emails, legal filings, and internal memos that painted a damning picture of Cassian's relentless sabotage. He saw Code for Good as a weakness, a distraction from pure profit. He couldn't understand why I'd give away technology when I could be selling it. Ilara's mind raced, connecting the dots. Cassian's thinly veiled threats, his smug confidence. It all clicked into place. "So he thought he could use me," she murmured. "Use my code to one-up you, and cripple my startup in the process." Julian nodded grimly. "And make it look like I was the one betraying you." It fit his pattern perfectly. A fierce resolve ignited in Alara. "We can't let him get away with it. We have to prove it." Julian's gaze met hers, a shared determination solidifying their bond. The hidden meeting room in the accelerator felt like a war room. Lena, her usual pragmatism sharpened by a newfound indignation, spread a whiteboard with flowcharts and timelines. "Okay, so our best bet is to use their arrogance against them," she stated, tapping a marker against the board. "Cassian's team is so confident in their stolen code, they'll likely try to demo it directly after Alara's final pitch." Alara leaned forward, her eyes glinting with a strategic fire. "We embed a digital tripwire. Something that activates only when their version of the code runs, revealing its origin." Julian, quiet until now, interjected. "It needs to be subtle enough not to trigger prematurely, but undeniable once activated. I can help build the failsafe, ensuring the integrity of your original IP is unquestionable." The plan was risky, requiring precise timing and a flawless execution, but the unified front of Alara, Julian, and Lena felt unbreakable. A shared nod, a quiet breath. The trap was set. Later that night, the accelerator hallways hummed with a low, electric quiet. Alara and Julian lingered outside her workspace, the silence between them no longer awkward, but comfortable, profound. "You know," Alara began softly, looking up at him, "I was so wrong about you. I let my own fears, my own experiences, twist everything." Julian reached out, his hand gently tracing her jawline. "And I was too guarded, too used to people seeing only the name, the money. I liked being just, J. Thorne, with you, the person who saw my ideas, not my balance sheet. His thumb brushed her cheek. But I fell for you, Ilara. Your brilliance, your fire, your unwavering integrity. You reminded me what it felt like to genuinely connect, to believe in something again. Ilara leaned into his touch, her heart swelling. I think I fell for the quiet genius who saw past my rough edges, who understood my code better than I did, and who, it turns out, shared my past. We're more than partners, aren't we? Julian's smile was soft, hopeful, much more. The morning of the finals, the accelerator main stage thrummed with a palpable tension. Stage lights glared, reflecting off the polished floor. Ilara, Julian, and Lena stood backstage, a tight-knit trio. Lena gave Ilara a quick, encouraging squeeze on the arm. You've got this, boss. Show them what real innovation looks like. Ilara took a deep breath, her gaze finding Julian's. His eyes held a steady confidence that poured into her, calming her racing pulse. Together, he murmured, a silent promise. Across the vast auditorium, at a table reserved for high-profile investors and rival teams, Cassian Thorne watched them. A self-satisfied smirk played on his lips, a look of smug triumph. He raised a glass of water, almost imperceptibly, in their direction. A silent taunt. He had no idea the trap that lay waiting. Ilara met his gaze, a steely glint in her eyes. The game was about to begin. Ilara's voice, usually a careful instrument, vibrated with a controlled power she hadn't known she possessed as she navigated her final pitch. The accelerator's main stage lights felt like a spotlight on her soul, but this time it fueled her, rather than diminished her. She clicked to the final slide, a sleek animation of her app's core functionality, then paused. And now, she announced, her gaze sweeping past the judges to lock with Julian's reassuring eyes, and then, for a fleeting, triumphant second, with Cassian's smug face across the room. For a small demonstration of what truly makes our innovation unique. A hush fell. Cassian, ever the opportunist, smirked, already anticipating his own team's presentation, which he believed would echo Ilara's. He had no idea what was coming. As if on cue, a notification popped up on the giant screen behind Ilara, * unauthorized access detected. Trace initiated. A live data stream began to scroll, showing an IP address, a timestamp, and a direct data transfer from Ilara's secure server to a server registered to Titantech. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Cassian's smug expression dissolved, his face turning a sickly pale. He started to rise, a choked protest dying on his lips. Julian, standing silently beside Ilara, stepped forward, his voice calm, cutting through the stunned silence. The timestamp correlates precisely with the breach in Ilara Vance's proprietary code. He stated, his technical backup irrefutable, his eyes fixed on his brother. And as you can see, the recipient server is unequivocally owned by Titantech. Ilara met Cassian's panicked, furious glare, a silent, powerful justice gleaming in her eyes. Backstage, the aftermath was swift and brutal. Cassian, his face a mask of disbelief and rage, was being escorted away by two stern-faced security officers. "This is a setup! You can't do this! I'm a Thorne!" he bellowed. But his words were hollow, powerless. The flashing cameras and hushed whispers followed his ignominious exit. Ilara watched, a knot in her stomach slowly loosening. Justice. It was a potent, satisfying feeling. Julian stood beside her, his expression somber. There was no triumph in his eyes. Only a deep, quiet sadness for the brother he had lost long ago to greed. "He made his choices," Julian said, his voice low as Cassian's desperate cries faded down the corridor. "Sometimes, the truth hurts more than any lie." The roar of applause washed over Ilara as her startup was announced the winner. Confetti rained down from the ceiling, sparkling around her as she walked to the podium. It felt surreal. A dream she had fought tooth and nail for, finally realized. Her heart swelled with gratitude and a fierce sense of validation. She looked out at the sea of faces, finding Lena beaming, tears streaming down her cheeks. Then her eyes found Julian, standing a little to the side, a proud, tender smile on his face. He'd helped her reclaim her dream, not just with his brilliance, but with his belief. "Thank you," Alara said into the microphone, her voice clear and strong. "To my incredible partner, Julian, and my unwavering friend Lena. This isn't just a victory for code. It's a victory for integrity, for partnership, and for believing in something bigger than yourself." Later, in a quiet corner of the post-ceremony celebration, the hum of congratulations faded into background noise. Alara felt a gentle hand on her arm. Julian, his blue eyes, usually so guarded, were open, vulnerable. "You were magnificent," he said, his voice soft, almost a whisper, yet it cut through the din. "More than a brilliant founder, more than just a partner. You're the strongest, most genuine person I've ever met, Alara, and I—" He hesitated, a rare vulnerability in his gaze. "I'm in love with you." Alara's breath hitched, his words echoed the unsent message she'd seen on his laptop, now spoken aloud. The journey they'd shared, the misunderstandings, the trust rebuilt, it had all led to this. He saw her, not as a charity case or a project, but as goading time. "I think I fell for you the moment you debugged my code with such quiet intensity," she confessed, her own voice thick with emotion. "But I was so scared, Julian. Scared of trusting someone from a different world. Scared of being used. I almost threw away the best thing that ever happened to me." Julian stepped closer, gently cupping her face in his hands. "You never have to be scared of that with me. I want to build a future with you, Alara. A future where we build everything, together." As he leaned in, his lips found hers, a tender, heartfelt promise of all that was to come. A few months later, Alara's newly upgraded office at the accelerator buzzed with the energy of success. Sunlight streamed through the large window, illuminating screens filled with thriving projects. Alara and Julian sat side by side, discussing expansion plans for her now booming startup and the next initiatives for his, Code for Good, foundation. Their hands brushed as they reached for the same document, a familiar spark passing between them. They shared a knowing look, a quiet moment of happiness that needed no words. Their partnership, professional and personal, was a perfectly crafted code, strong and resilient, built on trust, passion, and a love that had defied all expectations.